Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2025 Bermuda Championship Initial Research Show. What an amazing weekend for yours truly. Yes, it would have been nice to have the Sammy Valimaki or Patrick Rogers or even Gary Kigo outright, but I just put up the best performance in DFS that I have in the 4 or 5 years that I've been doing this. Really excited to share all of that success with you. And I hope you also had success at the Worldwide Technologies. You would know that I was on heavily on Sammy Valimaki, on Garrett Kigo, on Rico Hoey, all of these plays that turned out to be spectacular this week down in Cabo. I myself cashed 88% of the lineups that I played this weekend at the Worldwide Technologies. Again, just an amazing performance for yours truly. After a decent Bank of Utah, a profitable one, but obviously nowhere near to what the extent that I had this week. And then the rest of the early portion of the fall has been, admittedly, very horrible for me. So it was nice to get on the winning track as we move to the penultimate event for the 2025 PGA Tour season, the Bermuda Championship, obviously in Bermuda. So, per usual, on a Sunday evening, we're going to take a look at the tournament fact sheet. We're going to do our first look at the course, things of that nature. But I am still riding a pretty good high after the performance that I had this week, and I'll explain a little bit more of that at the beginning of the actual show. So let's get through this intro, shall we? All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description of the video, there are links to all the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where tonight I did post the lineup that I'll show you here in a moment on the show. But I posted a lineup along with a quick little message noting that I've been pretty quiet on social media considering the fall events. They don't have a lot of consistency. They're either new, like the Bank of Utah, like the Bay Current, or the prior winners of the tournament, like this week in Bermuda, just don't share a lot of consistencies year over year in determining a pattern of previous winners. But normally, if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and top player usage in the DFS contests I play. If you follow me over on X, you would have seen the betting card of Garrett Kigo and Thorbjornsen, Patrick Rogers, who ended up top, I believe, T4 or T6, the Sammy Valimaki at 100 to 1. That was very live until the end of the day today. The Garrett Kigo, all of that. And you would have seen in my DFS lineups, the 70% Chris Ventura, who played very well, the 64 or 68% Sammy Valimaki, the Rico Hoey, the Doug Gim, all of these plays that were excellent for the Worldwide Technologies. If you follow me over at X, you would have seen that at the end of last week, or technically Wednesday of last week before the tournament started. So if you want to see the players that I'm wagering with my own money and the players I'm using most often in my lineups, go give me a follow over at X. Lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle's in the description. He writes a fantastic article called The Fringe. I can't recommend it enough. By subscribing to his article, you're going to get his deluxe version, which comes out early on Wednesdays with his projected ownerships, favorite plays, things of that nature. He isn't doing much for the fall, but he is spending the fall enhancing that article. So you really are missing out if you aren't subscribed to it. And show him some support. Follow him over on social media. Lastly, for this intro, we are live. Chat's open. I want to hear from you all. How was your Worldwide Technologies? I really hope that you shared in the success that I had. Did you have the Ben Griffin outright? Did you play a lot of Ben Griffin? Did you follow me on Sammy Valimaki? Played a little bit of Patrick Rogers? All of that. Would love to hear from you all in that regard. And moving forward to the Bermuda Championship, what do you know of the course in Bermuda? How do you think it's going to play? Who do you think your favorite is? To be honest with you, this is a very weak field this week. It's just the nature of the business. This tournament generally attracts the weakest fields of the PGA Tour. So put your thoughts and opinions into the chat for the Bermuda Championship as well. And if you're not able to catch the show live, put your thoughts and opinions into the comments. I'll always get to those as well. So let's get into it. Let's do our initial research for the 2025 Bermuda Championship. Now, normally we start over at the GCSAA, but forgive me for being a little bit excited. As I said, this is a personal best for me. You see that the lineup here finishing second in this contest, the short game. I missed out by a half a point. And I'll be honest with you, for the majority of the back nine, I was in first. Garrick Higgo's par on the 72nd hole kind of cost me first place, with the addition of Trevor Cohn's birdie, who the winner had Trevor Cohn. So he was not tied for fourth. He comes up to tied for fourth, which splits those points with Garrick Higgo. Higgo loses some points. Cohn gains some points. And those are the razor-thin margins that you're dealing with in golf DFS. In DFS in general, but especially with PGA DFS. Having said that, I am by no means disappointed. That's not true. I'm a little bit disappointed to lose by a half a point, but I have no room to complain, as this tournament was exceptional for me. As you can see, clearly this lineup, overperformed, and there's the lineup that finished second in the short game, anchored obviously by Ben Griffin, who I played quite a bit of. I was much higher on Rico Hoey. I played about 60 to 65% Rico Hoey and more 40 to 50% Ben Griffin, but still played my fair share of Ben Griffin. Garrick Higgo, who was very high on, Pearson Coody. Sammy Valimaki was a stud for me all week. Really was hoping that I could hit that 100 to 1 outright on him. Not to be. Ventura I was very high on. Rogers, all of it. So, again, a little bit of some, I'm attempting to be humble bragging here in showing you my personal record or personal best in a DFS contest. I had finished third in a big GBP before. This is the first time I have taken the silver medal in a big GPP. But not only that, it's not that this was a one-hit wonder. I had another lineup finish in the top 35. I had another finish inside the top 100. Just excellent performances up and down my lineup, or my lineups, I should say. So, again, just a fantastic week for yours truly, and I really hope that you shared in that success with me. This is the lineup that I was alluding to during the intro, the one I posted over on social media, the one that is now my personal record of finishing second in a big GPP. So I'm going to go ahead and sign out of DK, and we'll go on with our regularly scheduled programming now. We'll take a look at the GCSA tournament fact sheet for the Bermuda Championship. Again, much like we had to deal with last week, we are going to look at last year's GCSA tournament fact sheet, as the tournament fact sheet for Bermuda, as you can see, is not out yet. We're hoping that comes out tomorrow, and I will start the show off with the tournament fact sheet tomorrow if it does indeed come out. But the course hasn't changed, and it hasn't changed in any of its previous iterations of this tournament. This tournament debuted in 2019 as a fall event. It was originally designed to be an alternate field event to a WGC, then became a regular tour event, if you will, after 2020 and the ridiculousness that was 2020. Port Royal in Southampton, Bermuda, is an RTJ design. It was most recently renovated in 2008 to with the intention to host big time events, as in PGA events, international events, things of that nature. Port Royal is what I will say, a traditional par 71. It is 4 par 3s, 3 par 5s, but you see that the yardage, it is extremely short. Just over 6,800 yards in Southampton for the Butterfield Bermuda. Very, very short course, sits right on the ocean, as majority of Bermuda does anyway. Some statistics for the course. Green size is 8,000 square feet, so not as large as the greens we saw in Cabo, but certainly very, very large, making greens in regulation not necessarily the best statistic to look at, considering these greens are still massive. Not a whole lot of fairway and not a whole lot of rough either. This is just a fairly small property to contain a golf course. 7 holes with water in play, and true to its name being the Bermuda Championship, the greens are Tiff Eagle Bermuda, which is seen pretty consistently on the PGA Tour. Kapalua, host of the Century, also has Tiff Eagle Bermuda. Bay Hill, the Arnold Palmer Invitational. PGA National, which is what used to be the Honda Classic, now is the Cognizant Classic. Sea Island, where we'll be next week for the RSM, also has Tiff Eagle Bermuda. So Tiff Eagle Bermuda is seen pretty regularly on the PGA Tour, and that is what these green surfaces are. Generally kept very, very slow due to the wind that is prevalent here at Southampton in Southampton for the Butterfield Bermuda. And we'll actually take a look at that here very quickly, or very soon. The rest of the course is a different strand of Bermuda. This 419. There is a little bit of zoysia as well throughout the course, in the fairway, and I would think in the rough as well. This rough is kept very, very short. Not a big factor at all for professionals. It is. I don't want to say a narrow golf course. The fairways are not very, very wide, but there aren't a lot of trees to stop the wind that permeates much of Port Royal, which leads to a lot of interesting splits, I guess, in terms of scoring around the Butterfield Bermuda. So the key takeaways here, again, this is an RTJ design, massive greens, very short course at 6,800. This is actually one of the shortest courses on the PGA Tour. Sits right on the coast, so think places like Pebble Beach. Think a little bit like Harbor Town, specifically like 17 and 18 at Harbor Town, how those holes are drastically affected potentially by the wind. Places like Waialae, host of the Sony, very short, very much on the coast, affected by wind, if any. So that is a look at the tournament fact sheet, at least last year's, for the Bermuda Championship, and the course has not changed all that much. Now, normally I don't do anything with wind on Sunday night. This is just a pure, get to know the players in the field, get a feel for the course type deal. But when you have a forecast that looks like this, now granted this is Tuesday, not Thursday, but when you have what looks like a deluge, and sustained winds in the 30s throughout the week, and even Thursday and Friday look like sustained winds into the 20s. Some tournament time, perhaps maybe some, strong winds into the 30s. You're gonna need to be aware of that moving forward this week, that there is a whole lot of wind in the forecast, looks like a whole lot of potential trouble for the Bermuda Championship, which is not uncommon here at this tournament. I vividly remember 2021 and Lucas Herbert winning in horrendous conditions, rain, 30-mile-an-hour winds. Much of last year was very, very difficult in that regard as well, with wind and bad conditions. So, as I mentioned in the intro, the field this week is pretty darn subpar by PGA Tour standards. Sahith Theegala is probably the biggest name in the field this week. Well, if I could spell his name correct. Sahith Theegala, probably the biggest name in the field, although you see he has not played all that well. But players like Kevin Yu and Cameron Champ and Rico Hoey and Matt Kuchar, Mark Hubbard, these fall event stalwarts are here for the Bermuda Championship. You don't even have the Ben Griffins this week. This is as close to an alternate field level, alternate event level field as you can get for a full PGA Tour event. Again, just not very strong field this week at the Bermuda Championship. So you can see there some of the players who have played best most recently in the last 36 rounds. I'll click on Kevin Yu because I know he was there at the Worldwide Technologies. Obviously, that tournament is not in here yet, having just finished a couple hours ago. First thing we can kind of take a look, we saw that forecast, and again, we'll update that tomorrow. But we're going to look at moderate and windy conditions. And your top performers... Oh, yeah, there's plenty of rounds here for... Oh, I need to click 2025. Let's do that. Okay, there's not enough rounds here. So let's go back to 2024. Your top performers in moderate and windy conditions. Now, just full transparency here. Windy, by Fantasy National standards, I believe is 17 miles an hour of sustained wind. I do not know what the moderate baseline is. But in moderate and windy conditions, your top performers in the field this week at the Bermuda Championship: Alex Smalley, Thorbjorn Olesen, Patrick Fishburne, Max McGreevy, Patrick Rogers, Doug Gim, Henrik Norlander, Matt Kuchar, Danny Walker, and Luke Clanton are your top 10. So throughout the week, make sure you give these players pretty significant bonus in considerations for wagers and lineups and things of that nature, because that forecast looked ugly, and it's probably going to stay that way throughout the majority of the tournament for the Bermuda Championship. So there's your top performers in moderate and windy conditions. The only other filter that we'll take a look at for right now, we might take a look at something else once we go through the course breakdown. Well, let's take a look at short courses. This is obviously a very, very short course at just over 6,800 yards. Again, I'm including 2024 because I don't think there's enough rounds. Yeah, most of these players only have into the teens in terms of rounds of data, so need to add 2024 to make it statistically significant. But your top performers on courses, or on short courses, deemed less than 7,200 yards, and this is 400 yards less than that almost. So your top performers on short courses: Mark Hubbard, Patrick Fishburne, Eric Cole, Rio Hitsatsune, Bo Hostler, Chandler Phillips, Victor Peri, Jonathan Bird, Patrick Rogers, Matt Kuchar, and Lonto Griffin are your top 10 on short courses. So let's take a look at the course breakdown here in Fantasy National. Get an idea on how difficult or easy, where any length on the course comes There's not much considering this is only 6,800 yards. Port Royal, and just very conveniently, I see here the top, or the first hole, plays to par. This would signify about an average difficulty golf course, and it's going to, in its totality, probably come up to that. As we look here, the difficulty of Port Royal is very, very much dependent on the weather. Last year's final round was miserable, and you can see that it played very difficult. In conditions that are but pretty benign, we're looking at maybe low double-digit or single-digit winds. This is a very easy golf course in a vacuum, essentially. But when it gets windy, it can get really difficult. We see that in 2022. Both rounds that the wind picked up, it was difficult. It was very easy in moderate wind. It can play difficult. You see, the only time it's going to play difficult, the best way I can say this, the only time it's going to play difficult is if the wind really picks up, which it does look like that's going to be the case this week, at least early on in forecasts. But even when the wind does pick up, it is not necessarily always difficult. And if it's ever calm, it's going to be very easy. If it's ever calm, it's going to be very easy. And it's easy sometimes even in moderate conditions. But with the wind, it can get difficult. So I do not want to call this an easy tournament or an easy course when you factor in all possible factors. True to what I would think, you see that first hole there plays right at par, which would signify average. The most difficult holes on the course, with the exception of the short par 3, the most difficult holes on the course are the long par 3s. Any length at Port Royal is in these par 3s. You have this 148 par 3 on the front, but the rest of these par 3s are long and difficult. Par 3 213 plays, pretty good percentage over par. Par 3 235 plays to 2/10 of a shot over par. Par 3 235 plays to 1/4 of a shot over par. Very long, very difficult par 3s here at Port Royal, with the exception of the par 3 third. Conversely, the 3 par 5s at Port Royal are extremely short. 553 is the longest. Plays to 1/4 of a shot under par. Not necessarily a great eagle chance, but a good scoring chance. The other par 5s are extremely short and very gettable. Par 5, 517. Plays to more than a half a shot under par. Par 5, 507. Plays to almost a half a shot under par. So, two very, very gettable par 5s and a good scoring opportunity on the other one to balance out the difficulty of par 3s. Now, the rest of this course, the 11 par 4s around Port Royal are very, very short. You have one par 4 that measures over 450 yards. Par 4 fourth at 458 plays to 1/10 of a shot over par. But the rest of these par 4s are very short. 438, 380, 370, 383, 350. But they're not drivable. They're not really all that drivable. This is a short positional course. Again, much like Waialae in that regard, in the sense that players just generally don't tend to be aggressive here because there's not really a need for it. The rough isn't penal. It's not difficult. And especially with the wind that is so prevalent around Port Royal, players really need to be in the fairway to control their spin when winds get into the 20s, maybe even sometimes the 30s like they've had in the past. So players really don't play aggressively, at least off the tee, at Port Royal, especially with all these short positional par 4s. much like we've had with the Bay Current and the Worldwide Technologies, no shot link here at the Bermuda Championship. So we're going to do some pretty good, some inferencing, if you will, take some educated guesses. But we do have a few years of data to work off of. So no shot link data, no strokes gained by shot type data. So we'll jump straight into the strokes gained by hole by par. See, for the top 10s, they're still taking advantage of the par 5s when they can, but they're playing these par 3s pretty well. That's what you're going to have to do around Port Royal. You're going to have to get your pars on these long, difficult par 3s. Maybe squeeze in a birdie every once in a while on the easy par 3. But they're playing these par 3s really well. Moving up to the top 5s, the distribution is very, very similar. And then for your winners, par 3s maybe not so much. They're actually playing these shorter par 4s a lot better than their competitors. Good evening, Phil. Thanks for jumping in chat. Very much appreciated. 50% Griffin and still didn't cash big. Well, I hate to hear that, but it does make a little bit of sense considering Ben Griffin was roughly about 35 to 40% owned. You did need to have some uniqueness. You kind of missed the early portion of the show where I showed I showed the audience my massive win this week. I was all over Sami Valimaki, who played extremely well. I had a few lineups with Patrick Rogers, who finished in the top 5. Garrick Higo, top 5. Ben Griffin, who I played 40 to 50% of. So if you're interested in what I attempted to be a humble brag, but if you're interested in seeing that, check out the beginning of the show afterwards. But the synopsis is that I had a huge week. I didn't cash the Sami Valimaki outright or the Patrick Rogers outright, which would have been huge, but I did finish second in a big GPP, and I was in first for the majority of the back 9 on Sunday, and then Trevor Cohn's birdie on the 72nd hole edged me out by a half a point. That's the kind of slim margins you're dealing with in DFS, but I did finish second in a big GPP, which I am very, very thrilled about. I'm not going to complain at all about the performance I had this past week. So I hate to hear that you didn't necessarily have as big of a week as you were hoping for, considering I knew you were very, very high on Ben Griffin. I'm going to try and keep the momentum, and we're going to try and build some for you for the last 2 events of the fall portion of the schedule. But thanks for jumping in chat. Phil, very, very much appreciated. I also realized throughout the weekend that I ended up not talking about Seamus Power Wednesday night, and I probably wouldn't have all that much. I believe the best thing I had for him were his proximities. He ended up playing pretty darn well. I don't remember how he finished up today, but I know he was lurking on the outskirts of the top 10 for most of the tournament. He must have fallen back a little bit today. There he is. No, yeah, T27. Yeah, he only shoots 2 under today for a 70. So didn't have as good of a Sunday as what is needed for for you to climb. Like Nico Echeverria shooting 9 under today, Griffin shooting 9, Valimaki 8, Rainey 7. So he didn't have the Sunday that he needed, but I knew he was up there in terms of lurking on the outskirts and the periphery of the competition. So I will, give you a hat tip on you asking about Seamus Power. I would not have been there on him, and he ended up playing pretty darn well. Moving down into hole composition for Port Royal. Pretty darn clear in terms of what is important here. You've got the one short par 3, and then one par 3 from 200 to 225 measures 215 on the scorecard. So you can see that, perhaps coming under 200 if they move tees and pins, but you can also see it moving over 225. And then you've got the 2 very long par 3s at 235 each on the back nine. Those two are needed to be played well if a player is going to be in contention. 6 of the 11 par 4s fall from 350 to 400. Now, none of these are drivable. Your shortest par 4 is at 350, I believe. But you see it's only a 0.1% eagle rate. It is not getting eagled all that much. It is not drivable. It's just a good scoring opportunity, much like the rest of these shorter par 4s, 380, 370, 383, 350, 383, 393. Lots of short par 4s around Port Royal. And then the next bucket, 4 of the 11 par 4s fall from 400 to 450. And honestly, they're in the shorter end of that as well. 410, 412, 443, and 438 are on the longer end. But, lots of short par 4s around Port Royal. You only have one par 4 above 450, and that's at 458 on the scorecard. So, not a lot of long par 4s here. I would classify 0 long par 4s here at Port Royal. And then the par 5s, you've got 2 very short par 5s, 517, 507, and then one above 550 at 553. Yep, 553. So, again, much like the entirety of the course, it is short. It is very, very short, with the exception of the par 3s. Scoring distribution is a little bit misleading considering how much the wind plays a factor at Port Royal. You do have 22.5% or so birdies. Even in moderate winds, this course is very, very gettable. It is only when the winds really pick up that high scores come into effect. But you see doubles here, there are quite a few of them. There can be some high scores if players aren't playing their best and the wind is not cooperating. Historic cut line, and that is, again, portrayed here. It's been as high as +2, which would be difficult. +2, +1. It's also been as low as -8 in 2023 when the wind was very calm that tournament, especially in terms of the cut portion. -8 cut. That is ridiculous. That is extremely easy. Last year being -1. So very, very, very much wind dependent on how difficult this course plays, as you can see from the fluctuations in just the cut line. Driving accuracy, only 55% here. Now, this is different than what it would be at a place like the Worldwide Technologies or the Black Desert, things of that nature. These fairways are much narrower, but players aren't being aggressive. I guess I shouldn't say El Cardinal and Bank of Utah and Black Desert. I should say places more like Sanderson Farms, the Country Club at Jackson, because the driving accuracy there isn't all that high. Places like maybe TBC Craig Ranch. Those places, players are just hitting driver because they don't care about being in the rough. These fairways are fairly narrow. These fairways aren't necessarily that easy to hit, and players are trying to hit them. Again, just the difficulty of controlling your golf ball in such high amounts of wind. Players are clubbing down here, and they're still not able to find fairways. It is difficult to find the fairway here, but it is also at a premium. Green and regulation percentage, despite them being massive, 8,000 square feet, you see the green and regulation percentage here is not that much higher than the average tour event. Again, playing to the wind, or a nod to the wind being so important. Now, the difference is, even if players miss the green here, scrambling is pretty easy. Around the green play is pretty easy around Port Royal. So players are able to scramble their pars a lot easier than most courses if they miss the green in regulation. And and then 3 putts per round, about average for a PGA Tour event. So there's a look at Port Royal in terms of a scorecard and graphical view here at Fantasy National, or here on Fantasy National. We'll come back to the players in the field this week for the Bermuda Championship. Until that forecast really kind of solidifies, and we might not get a solid forecast until Wednesday, but until we get some more information or see if we see a pattern in how those forecasts think the weather's going to be for tournament play, I'm actually not all that excited to use any scoring filters for right now. I would much prefer to get some more data, some more a more solid idea of how the forecast is going to be. Quite honestly, with the forecast that is active right now, I would think this was going to be pretty difficult. But I can't say that with 100% certainty, so I'm just going to kind of leave it alone and see if we can't get a solid forecast moving forward this week. So this could be easier than Mexico. I would not think so based on the forecast. And I know we normally look at Wind Finder starting on Monday. I actually showed the future forecast at the beginning of the show, Phil. It is horrendous. We're looking at 30-mile-an-hour sustained winds at some portions during the tournament. This coming Tuesday, which I understand is not, tournament, but this coming Tuesday looks like they're having 40-mile-an-hour winds and just getting a monsoon, basically. Looks like it's going to be completely rained out for any practices or anything like that on Tuesday. So I don't think it's going to be easy by any stretch. Certainly not as easy as Cabo this past week. But the course, when the wind is not a factor, does play extremely easy. In fact, if I bring up previous leaderboards, like 19 under Campos wins with a very difficult round 4 last year. I mean, he shoots 9 under on Saturday in, great conditions. So if the wind cooperates and it is very calm, you could see some scores like we saw in Cabo, just not with the regularity that we did. It almost seemed like everybody and their brother was shooting 6-7 under in Cabo. You'll get a couple of those. You might get a handful of those, but not to the level of consistency that we did in Mexico. Hopefully that answers your question or your statement or whatever. 19 under last year, 19 under for Seamus Power, 15 under Lucas Herbert. This is when this was, it says 2022. This was the fall of 2021. I vividly remember this. This was horrendous weather. I mean, the flag sticks were literally at 90-degree angles, raining. It was horrible. So 15 under in very difficult conditions. Brian Gay wins at 15 under. 24 under with pretty benign conditions from Brendan Todd. So you could get some pretty good scores here. I do think they're going to be deflated and kept in check because of the wind this week. So we looked at moderate and windy conditions. We looked at short course. So let's just go ahead and take a look at some big picture views of these strokes gained categories. I actually don't think off the tee is going to matter much at all. Again, this is a club down course. Players technically could hit driver, but they just generally don't. There's not really a big advantage to hit driver, especially with the wind. That driver could get sprayed in very dangerous places like the ocean, and it is needed to be in the fairway to control your spin. So I actually don't see off the tee being that big of a factor this week. So we'll jump to approach. Your top approach players in the field this week for the Bermuda Championship: Ben Coles, Rico Hoey, Victor Perry, Doug Gim, David Skins, Rosen Miller, Grayson Sigg, Luke Clinton, Mateo Montecero, and Antoine Rosner. I do think around the green is going to be a pretty decent factor. We saw in the course breakdown how even with these massive greens, 8,000 square feet on average, green regulation percentage is actually right at average tour event. These greens necessarily aren't the easiest to hit, and that's just because of the wind. So your top around the green players in the field, Mateo Montecero, Matt Wallace, Andrew Putnam, Taylor Montgomery, Chandler Phillips, Takumi Kanaya, Adam Svensson, Paul Peterson, Jonathan Bird, and Bo Hostler. Skipping James Hahn, he is an alternate at the moment. That is why he is starred. And then lastly, we're going to look at Bermuda putting. If I take a look at the conditions real quick, my guess is they were slow, and that is what is being confirmed here. So if I were to look at Velcro speed, see, green speed, it doesn't even come up with Velcro. Oh, that's because I have 2025 on here. I'm an idiot. That's why. So if we look at Velcro speed Bermuda greens, my guess is this is just Kapalua. Okay. Kapalua, and then very rarely the Valero TPC San Antonio. But this is mostly Kapalua, which we could look at because those are also TIFF Eagle Bermuda. So instead, I think what I'm going to do is let's just go ahead and take a look at TIFF Eagle Bermuda. So we're going to start with Bay Hill, which these would be the outlier greens. These are always kept lightning fast. That is the outlier of this subset of data that I'm collecting here or putting in. Those are always lightning fast. The rest of these are generally pretty slow. But we have Bay Hill. We have PGA National. These are pretty fast as well. I should have mentioned that. PGA National, which is the host of what used to be the Honda, now the Cognizant. Kapalua. Very, very adequate comparison here. Slow, even, Velcro speed. TIFF Eagle Bermuda. I'll click Port Royal. We don't get any putting data from there, but I will include Port Royal. We also have Sea Island, the Seaside course. These are TIFF Eagle Bermuda greens as well. And I think there was one more, but I could be wrong. Nope, that's it. Bay Hill, Kapalua, PGA National, Port Royal, Sea Island. At those tournament. Oh, gosh dang it. I did the wrong thing. I'm going to have to go through that all over again. My apologies. Okay. Let's go all rounds. Let's bring in 25, 24, 23. And we'll go back to 2022 just to make sure we get enough data in here. Bay Hill. Well, Bay Hill. We'll go PGA National. Plantation, Port Royal, Sea Island, Seaside. All right. On courses with TIFF Eagle Bermuda greens, according to the GCSAA, your top putters in the field this week: Taylor Montgomery, Bo Hostler, Sam Ryder, Jesper Svensson, Nico Echeverria, Eric Cole, Chan Kim, David Skins, Vincent Whaley, Tyler Duncan, and Taylor Moore are your top putters specifically on TIFF Eagle Bermuda. Skipping Chesson Hadley, he is an alternate at the moment. Okay, with that, let's just take a quick look at a couple other things here very, very quickly. I definitely want to take a look at some short proximities. Whereas last week for the Worldwide Technologies in Cabo, I was focused on, this 150 to 175. That is absolutely not the case this week in Bermuda. We're taking a look at wedges, like 100 to 150, maybe even 75. So I'm going to take mostly a look at these three ranges of proximity. So you see, I'm going to sort on total procs, like Ricky Castillo, number 1, but I would not, count him as good in this situation because his short proximities are pretty bad. So the first name that kind of sticks out here is Ben Coles, 3rd and 5th at the 2 shortest, and then 39th, which is, acceptable. Somebody like Rico Hoey, who I've been very, very high on all fall, 6th in total procs, but it's his, medium to long irons that have been very good. His wedges and short irons have been, at least statistically, atrocious lately. So keep that in mind. Somebody like Matt Kuchar makes a lot of sense. Somebody like Paul Peterson makes quite a bit of sense. Norlander maybe to a lesser extent. Doug Gim a little bit. Yeah, Alex Smalley makes some sense. 35, 30, or 35th, 33rd, 15th, not bad. Camilo Villegas, winner here 2 years ago, makes some sense. Grayson Sigg, look at that. 6th, 1st, and 25th. Makes a whole lot of sense with these extremely short proximities. One more just because it caught my eye right down here at the bottom. Seamus Power, a former champion here at the Bermuda Championship, I believe. Campos, was it? No, that was Gay. Yeah. 3 years ago. You asked about Seamus Power last week at the Worldwide Technologies. He's played very well here at the Bermuda Championship at Port Royal. So, and a lot of that is probably has to do with the fact that he is generally very, very good with his wedges, Phil. So I wanted to make sure to highlight him because I saw him at the bottom of bottom of the screen, corner of my eye. Definitely wanted to take a quick look at some short proximities tonight. Let's take a look at some long par threes. Again, sorting on total par threes, but we're looking at this. 200 and 225 plus. Peterson, Lee Hodges, 3rd and 2nd, absolutely. Taylor Montgomery, Sammy Valimaki again, Gordon Sargent. Maybe an honorable mention to Chan Kim, who was very disappointing. I thought Worldwide Technologies would be good for him, and he did not play well at all. David Skins makes some sense. Austin Cook. Mal, who has withdrawn. He's no longer in the field. So, there's a look at your top long par 3 performers. And then you're going to look at par 4s from 350 to 4 and 400 to 450. These two ranges right here. Noah Goodwin, Matt Wallace, 5th and 6th. Kevin Roy, Taylor Montgomery, Sam Ryder, Paul Peterson. He's popped a couple times. Interesting. Max McGreevy, Nick Hardy, Takumi Kanaya, honorable mention, 25th, 31st. Okay. So there's a look at some of the statistics. We'll get into that a lot more in depth tomorrow for the Data Dive show. We'll end the show off this evening with the tournament history or strokes gained total tab. Your top performer in the past 5 years here at Port Royal is Justin Lauer. Very, very solid performances. Nothing outside of a top 20, a top 10, and a top 5. Seamus Power has played very well here, as I was alluding to. Winner 3 years ago. Another top 15, another top 25. He's been solid here at Port Royal. Patrick Rogers has been solid here. Vincent Whaley, 3 straight top 10s. He did not play 3 years ago. 3 straight top 10s. Playing the Bermuda Championship, so Vincent Whaley, somebody to probably think about heavily. Alex Smalley has been very consistent. He does not have the, upper echelon finishes like a Whaley or a Rogers, but he's been very consistent. 2 top 15s, 2 other top 30s. Some other notable names here. Mark Hubbard's played well. Camilo Villegas, he's got a win, but he's been pretty lackluster otherwise. Grayson Sigg, top 10, top 15, top 25, solid. Lipsky's been good in his past 2 years here. Other names here that might stand out. Dylan Woo's 4 for 4. He's an alternate at the moment. If he gets in, he's been consistent here. But really, kind of dominated by these first 6 or 7 players in terms of strokes gained the past 5 years. Lauer, Seamus Power, Patrick Rogers, Whaley's been excellent the past 3. Smalley's been very consistent. Hubbard's usually pretty good in these fall events. Grayson Sigg's been good here. Villegas, a former winner. Campos, the defending champion, not too bad. The other end of the spectrum, players who have not been good here. Harry Higgs, 0 for 2, not played particularly well at all. Matthew Neesmith, 0 for 2, not played very well at all. Let's see. Tagala is only 1 for 1. Let's get some players who have actually played multiple times. Robert Streb, 4 for 4, but very, very lackluster in terms of finishes. Henrik Norlander, 1 for 4. Jason Duffner, 2 for 3. Austin Cook has a top 15 and not much else to go with it. Trevor Cohn, who was very, very good in Mexico, 0 for 2. So there's a look at the players who have and have not played well the past 5 years. That's what I have for you all in terms of an initial research show. Thanks to Phil for jumping in chat. Very much appreciated. Sorry to hear that your week wasn't as strong as perhaps we were hoping for, considering how much you were in on Ben Griffin. So we're going to try and help you build some momentum, turn it around, if you will. And I'm going to try and keep my momentum after my personal record for the Worldwide Technologies. So thanks to Phil for jumping in chat. Thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do. Taking a very in-depth look at golf statistics, giving you a statistician and data analyst view of what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. This week, I won quite a bit of money, so it feels pretty good to have a solid week towards the end of the 2025 season. So thanks again for all the support, for all of the wagers you made this past week, for the Worldwide Technologies, for all the DFS contests you played this past week at the Worldwide Technologies. And until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive Show, may all your bets be profitable.